Good people of the internet, repeat after me. Kickstarter is not a store. Kickstarter is not a store. Kickstarter is not a store. If you don't believe me, here's Kickstarter itself saying it isn't a store. You don't buy things on Kickstarter. Kickstarter allows someone with an idea and the need for funding to sell the idea of their product to an audience. And if everything plays out, those that invested will receive the product they were promised for their investment, or at least something vaguely similar to it. But successful Kickstarter campaigns will not be the subject of today's video. I started researching the matter when I read about how the extra battery for Canon cameras allegedly turned out to be one big scam. This battery was meant to replace a Canon LP-E6 but provide double the capacity at almost the same size. When the campaign launched, big photography sites such as DP Review, Canon Rumors and F-Stoppers reported on it, and thus making it many Canon owners aware and possibly interested in the extra battery. As things stand today, 1,500 backers who combined pledged over $220K on Kickstarter never received or even saw a working product. And because just one campaign is never enough, the same campaign was also launched on Indiegogo, where it raised another $230K from almost 1,600 backers. Yep, that's almost $500,000 combined. It's not just scams on Kickstarter you should be aware of. There are many potential pitfalls for a campaign, especially when it comes to hardware and electronics. Let's talk about why you should think twice before pledging your hard-earned money to a Kickstarter campaign. Back to the project I first mentioned. Everything about the extra battery seemed legit. It had a solid timeline. Their claims about having double the capacity of an original Canon battery were realistic when you calculated the capacity of the individual cells, and they showed what appeared to be working prototypes in their videos. Cracks in the facade only began to appear when Canon Rumors didn't receive an affiliate payment or even an answer to their inquiry, and so they started digging. As it turned out, the company Ultra Performance, who is apparently making the extra battery, has no web presence, and there was seemingly no one to be found with the alleged CEO's name. It got even weirder when it was discovered that all of his images were nothing more than stock photos of an American or European looking person. As it turned out, Jeffrey Parker wasn't the CEO's name, and the company wasn't based in California, but in China. There's actually some fascinating background on the alleged company that launched the campaign, which Tony Northrup dug up, and I highly suggest you watch his video if that sort of thing interests you. The short version of it is that Ultra Performance was registered by the KMC Accountancy Corp, who help Chinese companies become registered entities in the States. The actual company is located in Hangzhou, a city in China, with 8 other companies in the same building. The CEO's name, Li Yiyang. I do apologize if I butchered that pronunciation. Of those 8 companies in the same building, 3 have active Kickstarter campaigns, all with varying degrees of controversy. Slightly suspicious, wouldn't you say? I went one step further and, just for and giggles, had a look at their US mailing address, which was listed in the registration. It's either a Chinese club, an IHOP, a Chinese gun and ammo shop, or, dun dun dun, a Chinese accountant. This whole situation feels like it would make for an interesting episode in a true crime series. I was already thinking about putting up photos of the individual places on my wall and connecting them with red string showing how they relate to one another. It should be quite obvious by now that the extra battery was a very cleverly disguised alleged scam. In hindsight, it's easy to say, oh well, that and that should have tipped you off. I don't blame anyone for investing, and if you did pledge your money, I definitely feel sorry for you, because you won't be seeing that money ever again. For better or for worse, that's how Kickstarter works. And that is one of the many reasons why you should never treat Kickstarter as a store. In a store, you generally don't buy something, but then before you leave, it gets taken away from you again. And you wouldn't take an empty box containing an A4 with an idea written on it to the till either, would you? It's also not the same as reserving a certain item, because you know that that item exists and is actively being produced. On the extra batteries page, it even says we will work hard to ensure that we deliver what we promise and to go the extra mile whenever possible. There's no guarantee that they will ship the product. They can just claim that things didn't work out, the money dried up, and that's why they quit. Even if a campaign isn't a scam and you've got every reason to believe that the product does indeed exist, it doesn't guarantee that you will be getting what was promised. Take the ZANO, I'll call it ZANO mini drone, which received £2.3 million from backers. That's only about £2.2 million more than what they wanted, and it was dubbed Europe's largest Kickstarter, but ended up being one of the first high-profile Kickstarter failures. The campaign was launched towards the tail end of 2014. Around the same time, DJI was preparing to launch the Phantom 3. The Mavic would not be seen for another 2 years. The ZANO drone wasn't a scam, because as a report later revealed, the funders didn't end up rich and they were actually attempting to ship a product, and not just attempting, as some backers did receive something. It often didn't work and features that were promised were missing, but it was something. They had clearly overpromised and underdelivered, and the massive amount of money they made was just wasted. ZANO was the brainchild of self-taught engineer Ivan Reitman, and his problem was that neither he nor his team, and I quote the report, possessed the technical or commercial competence necessary to deliver the ZANO as specified in the original campaign. And they obviously weren't ready to lead a company upon which such high expectations were placed, as proven by Ivan Reitman's resignation because of irreconcilable differences. I know a bit about Arduino programming and can build something like this, a Wi-Fi connected NFC card reader which I can play a certain Spotify album by tapping it with an NFC chip, but I would never dream about giving this to anyone else. First, there is no case because I don't own a 3D printer. Besides that rather large issue, I have no idea where I could get the individual parts and who would manufacture the product. Right now, everything you see is built out of hardware meant for prototyping. As an electronics product, which also includes Wi-Fi, I will probably have to get a number of certifications, and finally, this thing works for me because I built it, well, for me. I don't have the resources to test this thing in numerous setups, and I have no plans of making it user-friendly. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure Ivan Reitman is way more talented than me. I'd never go as far to call myself a self-taught engineer or anything similar. And in 2014, people were already building their own drones to race with, and you could already buy a handful of pocket-sized drones. If you watch drone videos from 2014, you'll also see that even by today's standards, they weren't bad. My point is that what Ivan Reitman promised was in fact realistic. If, and it's a big one, he knows the right people or can employ others who know the right people. Sometimes you'll also have to make decisions that might bother you but would be for the greater good, such as employing a CEO and not just naming yourself the CEO because it's your project. As I mentioned earlier, ZANO died because the people behind it weren't competent enough. Maybe they just needed somebody who knows how to launch a hardware product to the masses. I'm not saying that this happened in ZANO's case, but I feel like many projects fail because those that came up with the idea and built it aren't capable of leading a team, let alone a company. Just think about all the parts that go into a drone, even one as basic as the ZANO. You've got batteries, gyroscopes, the PCB, controllers, and so much more. And at the end of the day, it is also something that flies, so you better make sure it stays in the air. GoPro karma. Let's move on to another issue when it comes to Kickstarter projects. To be successful in crowdfunding, you need superb marketing. Sometimes it has to be good enough to have backers forget what they're actually investing in. A good example, and sorry, this has nothing to do with photography, is the OUYA, or OUYA as I like to call it. The OUYA was essentially a mid-range Android phone with outer screen packed into a cubic plastic case. It hooked up to your TV and it shipped with a controller for gaming and menu navigation. At the time, the OUYA Kickstarter was the 5th highest earning campaign in the website's history. Its promise was that as it was running Android, anyone could release anything for it. I guess that is what drew in so many backers. The Xbox, PlayStation, and at the time I guess it was the Wii and the Wii U were very much closed systems, and only established developers and publishers had a chance of releasing anything on them. But the OUYA ended up being exactly what it actually was. A mid-range Android phone you could connect to your telly. And people discovered that Android games which are designed for phones aren't the same as console games. Not only that, but many Android games aren't built to be used with a controller. OUYA did try to right that wrong and launched a controversial funding scheme in which games had to remain OUYA exclusive for 6 months. In the end, the OUYA was a dud. The games were missing and the hardware just wasn't good. Games would stutter and the buttons on the controller frequently got stuck, making it almost unusable. For me, the OUYA and ZANO proved that we all are too gullible at times. Sometimes you need to take a step back and just think about the project you're willing to invest into rationally. The ZANO was supposed to be a drone that, were you to believe the videos, could compete with a Phantom 2 or 3 from DJI, who had been building drones and drone components for a number of years by then. Looking back on the ZANO campaign, there are certain things that should have made people suspicious about whether they were going to receive the product that was shown off on Kickstarter. For example, nothing was ever said about the camera other than the fact that it was a 5 megapixel HD video camera. 5 megapixels might be okay, but at the time the iPhone 6 had an 8 megapixel camera and the Samsung Galaxy S5 had a 16 megapixel camera and could record at 4K. Could it be that a 5 megapixel sensor that can only record at 720p might not be up to scratch? Does a company mainly focused on building hardware also have the capabilities to build a good image processor? As the Google Pixel showed in more recent times, you can achieve great things with an old sensor, but you do need the talent. The OUYA promised to be a not very good Android phone you could attach to your telly, and that is exactly what it ended up being. But through some clever marketing, they managed to convince people to put money into the campaign. A lot of money. Both products are prime examples of Kickstarter not being a store. If you buy, let's say, a new PC and the specs say it's got a Ryzen 7 processor, an RTX 2060 and 16 gigs of memory, but what you end up getting was a Ryzen 5, a GTX 1060 and 8 gigs of RAM, you would immediately return the product. With Kickstarter, there are no returns. There are no guarantees that you will get what it says on the box or on the website. There are no guarantees that you will get anything at all. And because I don't want to end this video talking about a console, a further example of good marketing, bad product is the Yashica Y35 Digifilm camera that raised over £1.2 million on Kickstarter. The novelty of this digital camera was that you could buy what they called Digifilm, a film roll looking thing you could insert to the camera to achieve a certain style. Come on, why would you want that? Despite the stupidity of it, nearly 7,000 backers invested a combined £1.2 million. And of course, the Digifilms had to be bought separately at around £15 a pop. You see, what you're doing there is essentially buying a single Instagram filter. There's nothing special about Digifilm. Everything could have been baked into the camera, such as the film simulations on my X-T4. It must have been a really appealing product for hipsters that didn't want to learn or invest time into film photography. Once again, as people received their cameras, they got what was described in the Kickstarter, a toy camera with physical and paid for Instagram filters. In addition to that, the hardware was terrible and started to fall apart within days, and it even featured things such as fake buttons. That is, if you even got your camera. As with so many other camera and hardware Kickstarters in general, this one was plagued by delays and manufacturing issues. The saddest thing about it is that a little bit of careful reading would have made backers think twice. Underneath each image showing the filter, it says the following: the above photo is for reference only. It just intends to illustrate the style and mood to be delivered by filter X. If you put that sentence through the bullshit translator, it spits out, the above image was shot with a professional camera and we edited it to kind of match our filter, but please ignore this text and just look at the pretty photo. I was planning on packing everything on the photography Kickstarter subject into one video, but the script just kept going and going, and you know what? I need content for my channel and nobody watches a 20-minute video on YouTube. And don't worry, there will also be an episode on why you should still invest in a product and how to identify whether it is legit and realistic or not. With that said, it has just about been enough from me for one day. If you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button to show your appreciation. If you didn't like this video, hit the dislike button twice to make it extra impactful. I've been Liam Alexander Coleman and this was me talking about photography Kickstarters. You have not been Liam Alexander Coleman, but I will see you in the next one. Bye.